So we'll start with you, Mr. Carter. What is your opinion of the state of public education in South Carolina today?
I think it has a lot to be desired. I think there's a lot of dedicated professionals, teachers, staff, otherwise. But I believe the legislature started on a correct path last couple of years to try to do something to change financing, give some more money to teachers, try to reduce some class sizes. I'm just really concerned now with the COVID where that's put things. I think people are going to have to maximize their efforts in order to be able to get back to where they thought they were going to be.
Yes, sir. What would your first step be in terms of improving education if elected?
It's got to be making sure that teachers are getting a salary that's equal to the task, and what you're receiving on average today is not. And again, I think there's a lot of sympathy and recognition, and there's a desire to make sure that that's corrected. The issue is there was money last year. Don't know where that money would be now going into the new budget, but I would say what it's going to require is some creative thinking, some strategic thinking by people in the legislature, and otherwise, I think money's going to have to be reapportioned, reallocated to make sure that some of the actions that were being pursued last year, that we can move them forward. Not only salaries, but just resources, other things that would kind of help better prepare where we need to be in the next few years.
Okay. Which kind of leads me to my next question, which is what are some specific steps that you would take to address those funding issues? Like you said, the plan that we had before, we've lost something like $300 million of the budget surplus we thought we had. What would be some specific ways to address that going forward?
Well, one of the things I think you first look at is actions you can take to eliminate waste, eliminate redundancy. I mean, what you need to do is make sure that you are spending your money wisely. And as such, then, maybe there's some money to work with. Again, I think I would look to see where monies are available to reallocate. I think it's critical to make sure that we get teachers a salary. I'm originally from North Carolina. I worked for the state of North Carolina for 10 years. I know what it's like to be a state employee. It's a privilege, but it's also a problem at times with the bureaucracy. Again, I think there's a great willingness to try to help and support teachers. I think it's just a matter that people got to be creative. Our leadership's got to be creative in making sure that we get to the end goal.
Yes, sir. In your opinion, what would a successful accountability system look like for education?
That's a hard question for me to answer. I think what we're talking about, you got to have metrics in place so you can look at the results. I saw SC reports a few weeks ago, and it showed that there's still significant gaps in achievement. So it would tend to suggest that our kids are not getting the knowledge that they need in order to prepare them for the skills that are required for the next 5 to 20 years. And what we can't do is allow this COVID issue to just increase that, lack of reaching those goals. So we've got to prepare our students. We've got to figure out where the need is, how to address it, and then put the resources to get us there.
Okay, thank you. Those are great answers. I'm gonna let Ms. Lehmacher answer the questions via text, and then if we have some more time, I'd love to hear any other thoughts that you both have. Just let me send her the questions so that she can. And again, I appreciate your patience on the technology stuff.
It's great.
It is. If it does give you an indication of what teaching and learning is like right now, you can imagine an elementary school student trying to deal with this technology.
No, I feel more for the parents.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, they're having a hard time too.
I see Eunice is muted. How is she going to respond?
Yeah, I'm going to tell her that she needs to unmute herself. That's exactly right.
Hello, my name is Eunice Lehmacher. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. I want to thank everyone for hosting this. What an excellent program. I'm a former high school math and science teacher, and I have a degree in secondary education. I used to teach math and physics. I've also taught middle school. And then after that, I worked for many years as a director of Christian education, realized that I needed more time, more experience in mental health, and got a counseling degree in social work. And since then, I've worked as a counselor, including a counselor in a school setting in a rural school in Kentucky. You asked what are my priorities or my position, and I prioritize education. It is very important, and I think it's one of the things the legislature needs to fund. I'm just going to use the questions that are here on the screen that you printed out. So what's my opinion of the state of public education in South Carolina today? I think we have a ways to go. Clearly, with the COVID crisis, there's a problem right now. So many children are trying to do school without broadband access. It is challenging for children with we see the access problems. For example, children with ADD have trouble with online schooling, children who don't learn well independently. So there's a lot of things related to the crisis, but I think not only then, there were problems before that as well. As most people probably know, South Carolina often is in the bottom rankings of the last 10 states in the nation, and we need to prioritize funding. Our state has had a surplus for the last several years and has not raised teacher salaries. I think that should be a priority. I'm glad that it was passed in the last budget, and we'll see if that $3,000 gets to the teachers. The next question you asked was, what would be the first step you would take to improve public education? I think teachers need to make decisions about what's best for schools. They need to be on boards that make decisions. So the first thing I would want to do is ask teachers. I've read what your position here is at SC for Ed. I agree that teachers need a higher salary. I agree that class sizes need to be smaller, 25 or less. And I would like to see teachers making decisions for students themselves, so that they would be involved in the boards and have positions, and that teachers like myself would be legislators. So the legislators need to make decisions about how tax fundings are spent, that they should prioritize education. But teachers need to make decisions then about, given the COVID crisis, what priorities come first. Do we need to hire more teachers to lower class size or raise salaries? So that would be that. If elected, what specific steps would you take to address the funding of public education? I think public education needs to be funded by taxes. Certainly, I volunteered at my children's schools here in Pickens County for the past 15 years. Actually, my youngest graduated a couple of years ago. And I trust the teachers to make decisions about how things should be funded. But I think it's the job of the legislators to decide to prioritize education. There are many priorities currently for legislators to look at. I work currently in healthcare. I'm a social worker for Prisma Health. And obviously, during the COVID crisis, we need to prioritize healthcare and many other things. But education is one of the things I would give the highest priority to. But there are other sources of funding. I'm wondering if there could be public-private partnerships that would, for example, teach children coding. would engineering companies be willing to help sponsor coding classes starting at a young age and all through high school so kids learn how to program? I've worked with teachers at Clemson Elementary who applied for grants to help fund special programs they developed. Now that means teachers need time to write the grants and to do their creative ideas. So we can use multiple sources of funding, but I do certainly think tax funding, and if there's any surplus, needs to go to education. We don't know what will happen in the current crisis with the surplus and taxes. So we will have to make those decisions as we go along. What's a successful accountability system for education in South Carolina? And what would that look like? Once again, I would say I trust teachers. Teachers know what their children know. There's a lot of standardized testing, I think too much. And teachers have told me that as well, that there's too much standardized testing. We do standardized testing to get funding, right? Federal funding comes because we've reached some number, and those grants like to have numbers. So I'm not saying we should eliminate standardized testing, but let's have less of that, and let's have some other forms of accountability. I do not favor teachers' salaries being based on the test scores of their kids on a standardized test. A standardized test tells you how much the child knew on that day when they took the test. But the teacher uses multiple measures, so written assignments, talking to the students, group projects to determine their grade. And I trust teachers to choose the best assessment for the materials they're teaching. I will wait for the chat box for you to say what is the next question or anything else I should address.
You both touched on testing.
Thank you. I'm just now seeing the question. Is it okay to talk now?
Sure. Just 1 second. I just wanted to give Mr. Carter a chance to. I just wanted, since you both touched on.
I'm going to assume it's okay to talk now. I do not.
I'll let her answer first. I'm sorry.
Carter, of course.
Yeah. Thank you.
Standardized testing was waived, and I think that was appropriate for this school year. There are decisions that teachers need to make. I am not a current teacher, and I do not wish to make teacher decisions for them, but I think exceptions had to be made for this school year, and other ways to assess our students need to be chosen. There are federal laws about standardized testing which help with the funding, and certainly we need all the funding we can get. But to expect students to be held to the same standards as last year when they were in class every day is inappropriate in this situation.
Thank you. And Mr. Carter, I just wanted to ask you the same question. Since you both touched on standardized testing, whether you would support, as we did this year, waiving state tests that were not currently required under the federal ESSA law, because we have a number of tests that are not required under federal law, but under state law, we still require each year.
Yeah, I would. You know, this is one of the things I would defer to the experts in this case. That'd be you and your leaders at your various schools. I think you have to have obviously some ways to be able to measure. You know, you've got to have something so you know how to plan and make arrangements for the future. But I also think there should be the ability to waive under appropriate circumstances. So I think there's justification for having standardized testing. There's justification for saying there's an appropriate waiver given appropriate cause.
Thank you. And I'll ask her the same question too in a second. But is there anything else that you wanted to add that we didn't get to touch on before we go?
Well, I'll add a personal note. I've got a daughter-in-law who teaches at a Title I school in Charlotte. She teaches English as a second language to K through, I think, the 8th grade. But she also gets up every morning at 4:30 to teach Chinese students English. And she does that to supplement her income, which she also has to use to buy supplies for her classroom, which I think is one of the more ridiculous things in the world. So I'm very touched, and it's very personal for me. And it's something I think is very regrettable, and I like to do whatever I can to change those circumstances.
Well,
Yes, thank you. I wanted to thank you again for doing this. I think teachers and students are doing an awesome job during this time, and I know that it's very difficult. I also want to say that I know sometimes businesses choose to ask experienced teachers to leave when there's a financial crisis, and I do not think this is a good time to do that. I would like to keep our experienced teachers in our school systems so that they can be there to help other teachers with the training they need, mentoring, as well as helping with questions like how do we assess students. I also would like to point out that I won't be on the primary ballot. This is a primary election on June 9th, and I'll be on the November 3rd ballot because I'm the only candidate in the Democratic Party. So you'll see my Republican opponents on the primary, and you'll see then one Republican and me on the ballot on June 9th. And I welcome an opportunity to talk to anyone about education and hear more of what teachers want. I'm very grateful for organizations like SD for Ed, where teachers have spoken out and told leaders what they want. And I support your goals for more teacher planning time, smaller class sizes, more salaries, the start date after August 1st, and I look for and more teachers on the Education Oversight Committee. And I look forward to hearing more from you as well. And I would be honored to have the opportunity to serve as your legislator.